in a way, this should be quite a short session because Claire's already answered that question this morning. When Claire spoke, and she said that when she did a project, there was new energy around the project. You wouldn't get it in a normal lesson. And I'm going to try and persuade you in the next 20 minutes or so that action research will give teachers the professional insights and the energy to make their teaching easier and far more rewarding. So what I'd like to do is to start off by sharing some personal experiences of teaching and see whether you can identify, and I hope you don't think this is too arrogant of me. Hopefully you may look at this and see that you've transcended my difficulties and you can feel really smug. But let's try and share with you what exhausts me as a teacher, what is a burden. And I think one of the biggest burdens are those classes where the learners who don't want to be there, but they have to be there, they're mandated one way and another. And I just get fed up trying to cajole determined scholars to participate in what is a fascinating lesson. The other thing that is quite depressing is marking work that shows they haven't learned anything at all. And it's that awful realization that am I then not working as a teacher, or they have such little respect that they don't bother doing, decent work. And rather than trying to solve it, of course, I try and find different ways to blame them for the problem. Another thing that is exhausting is teaching topics that are pointless. Having to pay lip service to what somebody else has decided is important, but is really a waste of everybody's time. And also being inspected, whether it's Ofsted or Moxted or managers just doing observations of teaching and learning. I feel quite stressed and depressed by feeling accountable. And I think overall, the feeling of isolation, feeling on my own and wishing that I was a proper teacher, that basically maybe my problems are down to my personality, so all these things tend to exhaust me. They are a burden. If, however, I look at what exhilarates me as a teacher, learners responding positively always lifts me. When students join in, contribute purposefully, it lightens the room and it shows us that what we're doing is worthwhile. The opportunity to be creative in planning and preparing lessons. I really enjoy visualizing and imagining, being inspirational. That's a real reward. The general feeling that I'm making a difference, that I feel fulfilled. And sometimes when, you get that feeling, you feel you've got the best job in the world. Buzzing discussions with colleagues, when you can get into real excited professional discussions about what's really going to make that difference. And it's a celebration of what you can do together. And tied in with that is the feeling that you're being listened to, that you're working with a group of intelligent, caring friends who value your opinion. And that's one of the great things, even though these are on Zoom, these meetups we have, whether they're in, there's some of the smaller meetings we've had or in a grand meeting like this great feeling of community is so important. And what I'm going to argue or suggest is that action research actually restores your emotional energy. So you become that busy person that everybody tries to give a job to, because you know they know you'll get it done. And what I would once again want to do is to illustrate this, is to share some research that we did last year, that once again I'm going to stand on the shoulders of the giants from OTLA 7, who conducted their research through the 2 lockdowns. You may remember these lockdowns. You may still be living through them. They'd done this research in almost impossible conditions, yet when I read the reports and listened to their presentations, I was struck by the tremendous sense of well-being that was experienced, despite the teachers having to continually ditch their original plans and to refocus. And action research seemed to lead to them viewing life more positively. There was a huge sense of professional pride in being a better teacher and making a difference. There was a great sense of professional purpose. Teachers had a positive attitude that was driving teachers still to keep improving what they were doing in difficult situations. And the key thing was the professional resourcefulness. They seemed to have an energy, enthusiasm to use their new insights wisely. And I was really intrigued that through this pandemic chaos, the teachers, those who'd taken on these extra responsibilities, they seemed happier, more energetic and more fulfilled than other teachers. And so I began to look into this well-being, and part of my research took us onto the NHS website, which, to be honest, I lived on through the pandemic. And I found myself on the NHS mental well-being site, and I discovered the top tips for mental well-being were more or less a prescription for doing action research. I'll try and illustrate them. So 4 of the 5 tips were as follows. So the first tip was to learn something new. Well, that's what everybody was doing through lockdown in a way, but the people who were doing the action research weren't just adapting to going online. They weren't just developing coping strategies that allowed them to dump content online, but they were working in excited teams to challenge and engage learners. They were often finding ways to engage solitary individuals to get them into groups. So they're learning something new is something that energizes and makes you positive. And the next tip, which is an obvious one in some ways, is connecting with others. And through their action research, at this time of isolation and separation, teachers began to recognize individual needs more than they had done in mainstream classes, where quieter learners were often buried. By talking to learners in one-to-one situations, they had a chance to recognize these learners. They listened and they felt connections. And the other form of connections were teachers connecting with colleagues and suddenly discovering that there is a common interest in learning that's shared across staff rooms. It's more than simply getting by and leaving each other in politely ignoring what others do in classrooms. This was a real way to find out what was going on. And as teachers shared findings with each other, this was a real revelation, and it was a reassurance that other people felt like that. And the connection with mentors was also really important. It was possible through connecting with your mentor to have new insights into where you were going, and to join a new community. The third NHS tip: give to others where possible. Doing a purposeful action research project actually gave a structure that built on teachers' natural altruism. Teachers spend their time giving to others, looking after learners, thinking for them. Often in further ed, we overcare. That's long been an argument that perhaps we overcare rather than challenge. And this is teachers through the action research were able to give in helping learners, in helping colleagues. And the action research drew, I saw that action research was drawing on teachers' generosity of spirit. It provided fulfilling ways that teachers could walk that extra mile for learners and colleagues. And indeed, it's well been acknowledged helping less experienced teachers is one of the prime satisfactions for mid-career teachers, being able to pass on, some of the craft wisdom that you've accumulated over the years. And then the fourth tip from the NHS was be mindful, live in the present. And so this mindfulness, which people may be familiar with, is fundamental to action research, because what it does is it encourages teachers to investigate more deeply and hold our everyday actions to scrutiny. We become more aware of ourselves and the effects of our actions on others. We become more aware of the richness of learner experiences that too often we take for granted. So I hope that I'm convincing you that action research lifts the burdens on being a teacher, and that the professional pride, the professional purpose, and the professional resourcefulness that we all have the potential for is all there, that and that when we have a meeting, this infection of pride, purpose, and resourcefulness grows. So essentially, action research is giving us greater control and the ability to shape our lives and our learners' lives. And I think most importantly, to help our learners shape their own lives. So that is why I'll suggest engaging learners in the research helps motivate them. Their excitement will motivate us. And together, doing action research, we will have less of a burden. So some practical tips. And the first thing is to connect with your research communities to recharge your intellectual and your emotional resource. And some of you might think, well, I'm not in a community, but you are today. And because you're in a project, you are, even if there's only 2 in your team, you're in a community. And there are actually 3 people in your marriage. There is your mentor as well. So there may be, you may only have a team of 2, but there are 3 of you. There are 98 of us today, I believe. There can be research communities with your colleagues. You may have a small or a large team. Connect with them, connect with your learners, because the positive feedback you get sparks that energy, which really revitalizes. So work with your learners, work with your colleagues, work with us, work with your mentors. That's your research community. They will feed you. Writing a diary is great, but sharing that diary with your community is wonderful, because in all the discussions we have with teachers, they say one of the great things was hearing what other people had done and realizing They weren't the only ones. That takes you out of that debilitating isolation. And so you can go into your diary, and you're not isolated with your diary, you're enjoying solitude. The next practical tip is stay focused on your teaching. Don't be constrained by a research plan. If you find that the research is taking you away from your learners, stop. Follow your learners, not the plan. That is the way to understanding your teaching, to feeling that what you're doing is worthwhile, and to making sure that everything you do makes your teaching easier and more rewarding. And finally, remember that some direction and insights are more important than fulfilling your plan right till the end and reaching every single learner that you ambitiously propose to in your proposal. Work with a few people, make it work and make it ripple. Small steps in the right direction, because as I said earlier today, the key to this, and this is what ETF are investing in, is your personal and professional growth. So thank you, Claire, for this morning, for showing us the way and reminding us, through your own energy, how action research reduces the burden on teachers. Thank you.
Andy, such important words there. We really, really appreciate you reminding us of the many, many wonderful things that have come out of doing action research projects. There's ethics running through. Jean, you started us off today by saying there's a moral aspect to action research. And here we see that in terms of looking after one another and how this can help us to feel connected. So much to take away.